Yeah. Hey, good afternoon. How is everybody doing? I am Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver. Welcome to the Nerd Council of Doom, episode 1. You might notice we went live without the traditional opening credits that I do. That's because this isn't just my jam. We are all on an equal footing here, and the two guys with me, they're not just my guests. They're not co-hosts or anything. They're part of the inner circle telling you what you need to know about hot entertainment and nerdy topics of the day. So without further ado, Yang Yanzhou and the Dungeon Minister. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
It's all good.
Excellent. Up your gain a little bit, Yang. I was having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Let me see.
A little bit better now.
Let me crank you up just a little bit here. Give me a mic check.
Check.
That's a little better. I can I can control the vertical and the horizontal. Hello, Tonka Todd. Thank you for stopping by. Imperial Ramblings, aka Bo Ganora. We got to get Bo on the show to talk about some Warhammer tabletop.
Nice.
But yeah, this is just kind of a semi-formal, informal thing that I said, hey, you know, all the big YouTubers get together periodically and talk about important nerd matters of the day. So I thought, you know, you, me, the Dungeon Minister, Saint Beckme over there could all sit down and talk about stuff and things.
Always happy to talk about stuff and things.
Stuff and things
as well. I have some stuffed things around here somewhere. So I didn't shoot them myself.
Find them.
Yeah, just so long as it's not Loth related. I remember your comments last night. I didn't have that much beer on that stream. Cass, and I'm not even going to say it. I'm not even going to say it. Hello, Mikey Mank, GR. Good to see you all there in the audience. Yeah, you. What is going on, man? What is happening? You had some comic booky stuff you wanted to discuss, yeah?
Sure. Well, I thought even more important or more overarching than comically, where is the future of entertainment going to come from? So right now we see the downward self-destructive spiral of our big media companies, Disney, Netflix. They're making more and more things that people don't want at a higher and higher price. So at some point, so for example, with Netflix, people cut the cable cord to hop onto Netflix because they were tired of paying $100 or more per month just for entertainment, which how many movies did you really watch on those cable channels, you know?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Now we see a very similar thing on Netflix and on Amazon. Like, maybe there's 3 or 4 things I really want to watch per year. So where are we going to have the same kind of media that we've had for the last at least 50 or so years where it's all home-based? Will people just sort of opt out of that system? Will pirates roam the virtual seas? What do you guys think is going to happen to the industry overall?
I would say we already don't have that media landscape anymore. We haven't had it for a while. When the breakup of the sort of mono, the mono pipe, right? The broadcast networks and then the cable networks. As soon as that splintered into digital, things went just opened up, just blew wide open. And frankly, this is where I watch most of my content now. And I don't want to be like a old YouTube booster, but I watch way more YouTube than any other platform, and I'm watching it in 10, 20-minute chunks. It's short form stuff, except when I log on for the Delvers live streams and while the night away. But it's produced by whoever. The production levels aren't anywhere near as good, but the storytelling is better, generally speaking. And and I'm watching it in from people who make it because they love doing it, and maybe they make a little bit of money on the side. I mean, I think probably the biggest content creator that I watch, shameless plug for corporate side.
Uh-oh.
You're frozen on us, Dungeon Minister. He's been having some power issues where he's at, so hopefully he'll be back. Hello, Damien.
See, that's because he criticized big media.
Exactly. They got him. Big media got him.
On it quick.
Well, I to kind of pick up the ball and run with it. Hopefully he'll be back. I feel like there's a lot to be said for getting your content from content creators, not just necessarily YouTube. I think there's a lot of good content that's out there on a lot of platforms. Now, I gotta hand it to Google and Amazon, because Amazon owns Twitch, for pivoting really quickly and monopolizing and commoditizing these platforms as they did. Google especially really led the target extremely well in purchasing YouTube and seeing its potential. Now, they lose money every year. All right. They have to give me money, and they have to give you money, and they have to give Dungeon Minister money, because they've all got channels. You should, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to Dungeon Minister's channel and you're not subscribed to Yang's channel, do so. I insist that you do so. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, but you came here because of then subscribe to me. But anyway, Google did very well to snap up YouTube like they did and see the potential that it has. It's also unfortunate that Google snapped it up because, of course, we must all bend the knee to Brenda, or whatever her name is, who is in charge over there at YouTube, and decides that if I say fuck, that, you know, my video gets demonetized. But it is a very democratizing platform. It has been a very disruptive platform. And I think YouTube has kind of realized that. Have you ever been like watching like a video on YouTube and you see something, just a notification like, hey, you're talking about, you're watching a few videos on, you know, what if time travel was real? You want to rent the Terminator or Back to the Future for $1.99?
Actually, no, because I'm evil and I watch with an ad blocker. But but I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. And I think it's you know, yeah, you're 100% right. Google, at least what was it, 2008, 2009, Google really saw the future. I kind of, while I agree that not only is YouTube a very democratizing force for media and for communication and informing groups, more than that we've seen since cable access TV shows. But I don't know. I don't see Google as surviving the wave. I think they're going to hit that crest and crash and burn. I think we're going to see conglomerations of smaller channels, maybe in like a Rumble or an Odyssey. I think they're going to come out just because all that fantastic content that you really want to see, YouTube is going to filter out for you. And it's not necessarily going to be the jackass type stuff. It's going to be, you know, because they want to promote this creator or that creator. And it's when you start to try to take the reins and be like, well, this is the guy that we're going to have for D&D. So unless it's that guy is you know, that's not the place that you're going to end up finding your larger audience. So I think that, but I do think that the independent creators are really where it's going to be at. We can see that in comics, the group Comics Gate, which some people like, and some people definitely do not like.
Mhm.
They have books that are selling. I think they're like $3-4 million a year in gross revenue. So, that's a pretty significant shift in the market when American comic books are just circling the drain. They seem to specialize in finding new ways to lose audience members. So I think it's the same thing in games. I think we're gonna come to a point when, how many Wizards of the Coast update books are people really gonna buy? Whereas they're just gonna find a version that they like, whether it be OG, D&D 1E, or a lot of people like 2, or even 5, and just say, well, I like your rules, but I'm going to make my own lore. And you'll have places like DM Guild and Drive Through RPG, and those hopefully will start seeing more profitability and more people will try indie content as the stuff that Wizards of the Coast wants to put out becomes more and more bland.
Yeah. I mean, the blandification of stuff is definitely driving people to independent creators and creations, and not just in role-playing games. And that's one thing I just want to emphasize to our audience. Trust, you guys hear me rant about D&D 5 days a week for 3-4 hours a night. This isn't the D&D channel. Trust me. If I mention RPGs, I'm going somewhere with it. But no, I think you're absolutely right. I think the blander stuff gets made, the more people are going to go to individual creators. Now, as far as the avenues, I got to disagree with you just a little bit. Not in terms of infrastructure. Yeah. I'm sorry, but Vimeo and who else did you mention?
Rumble, which is
Rumble.
They've got some big creators. They just started live streaming. You have to pay for it currently, but they said within a year it's going to be free, like on YouTube. And Odyssey, which both of them are very good backup places.
They are good backup places, but I feel like right now, and I hate to say this because it becomes a self-perpetuating argument when you say X alternative platform can't get any traction because it's too small, and because it's too small, I'm not going to help it get traction. So it's going to stay small, and it can't get any traction because it's small. And, it just kind of becomes a cyclical thing. And I hate to say that. We used to have a discussion going all the way back to the early 1990s in information technology. And any of you guys out there who are propeller heads when it comes to IT stuff, if you want to chime in and back me up on this, if it's still an ongoing thing. But we used to say that this year is absolutely the year of the Linux desktop at home. Just like last year was, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. It'll definitely be this year, guys. And I just kind of feel like all those other platforms are Linux, or at best Mac OS, and YouTube, and Twitch, which Paul mentioned, and I'm going to address something Paul said in just a second in the comments, are kind of the Microsoft and Apple. That's what they are, and everybody else is just like various spin-offs of Linux. But that is a completely separate concern from the actual content creation. In that front, I think you're right. And Paul makes a very insightful comment here and says, with the corruption of reviewers in entertainment, word of mouth is the new standard I use to narrow down options. Live plays have all but killed game reviews. I'll check out a game on Twitch first.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And the question is really, well, why has live play replaced video game reviewers? I don't think it's because the live streams are inherently better, The problem is the reviewers became corrupted. The reviewers began to take money and free stuff and privileges from these companies, and you can't trust them any longer. Whereas a live play, like I can actually see what's going on and make judgments for myself. Me personally, I like shorter form content. So if I were to buy a game, I knew I could trust a reviewer or watch a live play, I would go to that trusted reviewer. But because they're so hard to find, I'm forced to go to the live play, which is, a different kind of entertainment. And I almost think it's a medium that goes back to the beginning of video games itself, because I remember as a kid in the 80s, you would go over to friend's house and you would watch one person play on Nintendo, right? And you'd have a whole group of kids watching someone play. And I remember that continued through, with the PlayStation, and I kind of dipped out of video games for a while. But I think that there's something to watching other people play, very much akin to like going to a baseball game and stuff. And ultimately, I think that's a new place where entertainment is going to go that we haven't seen as much. So Mark Twain once wrote, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. So I think we're going to see, even though we already have seen in the last couple of years a resurgence of tabletop gaming, I think we're going to see a bigger resurgence of that, but I think it's going to be more online with virtual tabletops. Not even just pandemic stuff, but more in that all of a sudden now, if in my local area, I can't find people who want to play my game of choice, no worries. I've got 7 billion other people to play with. And I think that as, Netflix becomes $20 a month. Oh, and you got to have Disney Plus, and that's $30 a month. And you're spending tons and tons of money on this kind of stuff. I think that what you're going to see is people enjoying games where they make their own content more. So the tabletop space is made for it. I think something other forms of entertainment where you have one or a relatively small number of creators to drive the medium, I think is where we're headed.
Yeah. No, I definitely think you're right. And, if you look at computer games, so you brought up tabletop games, and I think this merits mentioning. Almost from the time that practical computers were available to the masses, whether you regard somebody, the bedroom coders of the day, as a media company or not, they are the companies that were there, and they are the companies that were making software. Almost from the get-go, the first games available for computers were D&D alikes. Temple of Apshai, Zork for, to scratch your text medium itch, Rogue, what else, God, Telengard, Wizardry. They immediately wanted to start jumping in to tabletop games because they recognized the power, the potential energy stored up in tabletop role-playing games to entertain people. And I feel like all we've seen since 1976, I think, when Wizardry was released for the 16K Apple II, is companies trying to recreate the D&D experience in other forms. So I think you're right. I think you're definitely going to see people going out and trying to capture a segment of the tabletop market. I find it funny. It's literally, it makes me laugh. I have friends who were part of digital media and digital entertainment in the 90s who would try to convince me to come and play Warcraft with them all the time. So, Bill, this is your D&D night now. Everybody can be all together. You don't have to worry about going over to somebody's house and this, that, and you can just get together in just a couple of clicks. And I always kind of came back to, why are you so eager to pull me away from pen and paper? Why is it so important that I stop paying attention to good old-fashioned tabletop pen and paper D&D? If it's dying like you say it is, are you so concerned for my personal well-being that you don't want me to be left behind on the island? I don't think that's the motivation at all. Pen and paper, what a lot of people don't realize, is as vast as the universe. It is endless. I mean, you don't need a graphics card. You don't need a high-speed internet connection. You don't need DLC. You don't need a 4K monitor. All you need is your imagination and a pencil and some dice, not even polyhedrons. There are lots of role-playing games that are strictly and forever will only be D6s, which you can buy those in the impulse aisle at a grocery store. So it seems to me that digital media needs role-playing games a lot more than role-playing games needs digital media. If D&D was dying for all those years from the mid 1980s onward, then why did companies pour tens of millions of dollars into trying to replicate the tabletop experience in literally every form? I mean, Capcom released a side-scrolling Dungeons and Dragons beat 'em up in the 90s. That's how dead.
Kind of a Dungeons and Dragons beat 'em up.
I'm sorry, what?
Golden Axe was really a Dungeons and Dragons beat 'em up as well.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, there were two licensed D&D games that ran on the CPS2 hardware. The same motherboard that ran, what do you call it? Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, or whatever the hell it was. You just swapped the ROM cartridge for the Dungeons and Dragons Tower of Doom or Shadows over Mystara ROM cartridge, and away you went. So I think you're absolutely right. I think there is going to be a continued march to the sea for role-playing games across all mediums. I mean, that's kind of part of why I do what I do. And I might not like Critical Role. Spoiler alert, I don't. But the fact of the matter is, Matt Mercer's a rich dude. And so is his cast, shall I say. Hey, we got Dungeon Minister back. He's on mobile. Let me see if I can bring him back in here once he gets his camera steady.
So one thing I wanted to say is, I think where your friends in the 90s were both right and wrong with Warcraft is that there's always been this need that, that a lot of people play RPGs, when they're younger, and then people move away. You want to recreate those experiences where you can play again, but previously you weren't able to do that. Now, I think some of what the big thing with Warcraft, the original Warcraft series, was that you could play with people online. It was very limited, and really the medium itself at that time, you couldn't replicate D&D, whereas now you have like Roll20, or even playing on an evening on StreamYard, is really almost exactly the same as tabletop. And I see this going across the other mediums too. I'm working on a D&D campaign guide. I hired a guy in Brazil who we collaborated online. There's no way I would have found this guy 20, 30 years ago. and I send his drawn artwork over to the Philippines for color flats for a lady over there to do it. So just the whole democratization of the project. You mentioned, or I think the Dungeon Minister mentioned, that the production values aren't as good. And I think that's true. However, the production values are getting a lot better for smaller creators. And I do think that, as we go on, we lost him again. So as we go into the future, we're going to be able to get higher production standards from smaller creators who don't need the same overhead, who don't need to bring in the same amount of profit as these large companies to be able to keep putting on good quality entertainment.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And to go back to comics, this is something that I love to touch on. The Dungeon Minister is gonna we'll have to bring him back around next time. He's having too many technical problems, which is a shame, but he'll be in the comments, he'll be in the audience talking to us. But my attraction to Marvel through the 1980s was such that, like, even small press comics at that time were able to do tremendous runs. If your book made it to the point where Marvel was willing to spend the money on it. Thank you, Mikey Meg. Thank you for the super. But if you were able to get to that point where Stan or whoever said, yeah, we'll take your idea and we'll print it, we'll publish it, we'll absolutely do that. You absolutely had to guarantee that your book was going to shift 100,000 issues, and it could do it. If you were in that main run of Marvel superheroes, of stuff that people wanted, even if it was ancillary, like, you're just like, hey, I want to do a separate Colossus comic from the X-Men. Sure, that's at least worth 100K issues. But if you slipped below that, you were done. Your name was mud. You were the guy who used to work for Marvel. Nowadays, they crack open the champagne if they ship more than 50K of main Marvel titles: Spider-Man, X-Men, Incredible Hulk, Captain America, Thor, Iron Man. If they can shift over 50,000 issues of a book, it's considered a success. 50,000 issues of a mainline comic is back in the heydays, even into the mid-late 90s. Hell, I would probably say even until the mid-early 2000s. 50,000 issues of a book would be an unmitigated disaster. You would not work in mainline comics again. And nowadays, it is a chance for great celebration. That's just my observation.
And it's kind of a shame too. A lot of people are mentioning the failed policies of Marvel, and that's the thing that confuses me. I don't necessarily think all of their moves were necessarily bad. If you want to attract, in the US, women sort of got pushed out of the market for comics. If you said, oh, well, we're going to have some titles that are more aimed towards women, great, because we know manga is about 50-50 men and women. So there's clearly an audience out there that wants to hear stuff. But the problem is they took the titles that really appeal to men and just said, oh, well, we're going to make them appeal to women now. And I guess some people assumed that men were just still going to read them, or, they didn't care, as opposed to saying, like, rational human beings, well, men and women tend to like different things. Let's offer new books that appeal to women, as well as keeping these titles that appeal to men. And then you have other demographics, the LGBTQ. I'm sure there has to be some audience, but even just looking at what percentage of the population in the U.S. there is, you should make titles specifically aimed towards them, and make it, like very niche books aimed at a very niche market. Don't take your mainstream characters who have long-time followings and just turn them all gay and be like, why don't people want our books anymore? It's very, I don't know, people with no marketing experience running marketing departments.
Yeah. I don't understand this. And this is something I've said time and again. If you told me we're introducing a Marvel comic, it's about a young woman of color, Hispanic, Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, I don't care, who's equally as smart as Tony Stark, but she has a different lived experience, and she builds her own Iron Man-esque armor inspired by Tony Stark, and his speech to Congress about, hey, I've democratized freedom. And she says, you know what? I can do that too. And goes through the Bildungsroman, the story journey. This is something that gets talked about a lot. Like Ishii had like, this is one of his big bones to pick, is there are no good story journeys with women, with a possible exception, a Battle Angel. If you gave me that as a Marvel comic, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm going to read that.
Definitely.
I'll see if that's got some legs, and I would read it and I would enjoy it. Coming at me and saying Iron Man is too male and he's too white, so we're going to write Iron Man so he gives, Tony Stark literally gives the Iron Man suit and jobs to this woman who stole it, teenage girl who stole the Iron Man armor from him, destroyed one of the suits in the suit that she stole in doing so, and says, here's your new Iron Man. And if I raise my voice about that and complain about that, you then come back and say, well, that's just because you're a racist and a sexist. Yeah, I have a huge friggin' problem with that. Make your own content and make it so that you can stand on it. Make it so that it stands on its own. Going through and erasing Tony Stark and writing in whatever that character's name is doesn't suddenly make your new character, Ironheart or whatever she's called, good. It just makes Iron Man bad. But then that is their long game. That is their end goal, is not to create something new. It's to destroy something old.
Yeah, and it's a shame because a lot of the supposed goals, which increasing diversity and whatnot, people have been totally cool with, at least from the 80s. Rhodey was Iron Man for a while.
Yeah.
Pretending to be Iron Man. There's no reason you couldn't have that 15-year-old girl become. See, I don't think she should be Iron Man, but I think she should, to be like Iron Man. And it would be great, a great juxtaposition between a guy who, he's already earned his bones, but maybe he's a little set in his ways. He's sided with the government in Civil War and all these things. And maybe she's someone, who's a little bit more Spider-Man level, where she lives in the streets and she sees things very differently than from where Iron Man, who's focused on like these cosmic events, is located. That would be fantastic. But I think that there's a deeper problem in the people that they're hiring, in that, let's say you want to really achieve these goals. What you need like a certain moral center, and people don't seem to understand like who are the who are the real villains of the stories. So like if we go to X-Men, they're living on their own mutant island where they exclude humans. They're conducting like military raids in human countries. They talk about how much Homo sapiens superior, i.e. mutants, are better than normal humans. And it's like, holy crap, what am I reading here? You know, how is this good? You have Ironheart. She doesn't like Dr. Doom, so she just takes over his country, Latvia. It's okay to just, you know, go into other countries and take them out. Like, how does that work in the days of Russia invading Ukraine? So there's a lot of there's a lot of things you really have to ask. Like, wait, is this guy a villain or not? Or to bring it back to even the segment of Marvel that was doing better, the Marvel movies. Anyone who watched WandaVision, half of WandaVision was really good, actually. The middle few episodes of the series were pretty good. They tried something new. It really turned Wanda's character. But we find out she kidnapped a town of like 3,000 people, turned them into meat puppets, and made her do... made them live by her will, and and at the end they're whatever.
This is the biggest, like this was throw something through the TV moment for me. The first, what was that, a 6-episode show?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So the first 2/3 of it, whatever, 6 or 8, whatever it was, I think it was 6 though. The first 4 episodes were absolutely brilliant. And like, how does a superhero process trauma?
Mm-hmm.
How does a superhero process loss? We get a little bit of that in Tobey Maguire's excellent portrayal as Spider-Man when Ben dies, because the first thing he does is he causes the death of the person who killed his uncle. But we don't really see that again in the main Marvel Cinematic Universe until WandaVision. And they had a really cool thing going on with, okay, Wanda has literally turned these people's lives into like a hellish nightmare. I mean, we've all played sandbox computer games, the Ubisoft games, you know, the Far Cry games, or Skyrim or Fallout, and there's NPCs that will, like, day or night, rain or shine, they just stand there and they have like 3 pieces of dialogue. Imagine being trapped in that for real. And that's the people of Good Springs or wherever it was that Wanda did that. And then they completely fell apart in the last 2 episodes. And the thing that made me want to chuck a glass through the TV was that mealy mouth comment from whoever she was, Monica Rambeau or whatever, saying, and I quote, "They'll never know what you gave up for them." Oh my God, did you just say that? You literally mentally tortured these people for months, locked in actual hell. In actual hell. The woman, and I can't remember the actress's name, she played Marge in that 70s show. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she says, "I haven't seen my sons in 6 months. Please let us go." When Scarlet Witch's hold on the town is starting to fall apart. What did Scarlet Witch decide to do with her kids? What did she? Are they literally just like locked in their bedroom, slowly wasting away? What's it going to be when this psycho finally lets go? I mean, they'll never know what you gave up for them. What, a living horror movie? That was such awful writing.
Yeah, and the whole general, he's like, "Hey, we got to go in with missiles and everything." He was right. He was absolutely right. You don't want her taking over other towns too, you know. And they treat him, and didn't he get arrested at the end? Like, why? What are you doing? So
if she was that desperate, why didn't she just do that little hex around her own house.
Exactly.
Just literally like, hey, you guys might know me. I was in the Avengers. I just want a little part of the world that's my own. And it extends to my yard. Please try not to step through the red force field.
You know, and there's so much else they could have done with that. They sort of set it up so that Hydra was there. And, you know, in the movies, Hydra is how she got her powers. So, you know, why not have it like a latent programming from Hydra that got messed up? Or that
why not anything other than what they gave us, dude? The last 2 episodes of that show were garbage.
It was amazingly bad. Like, just how can you be so tone deaf? Usually they have writers' rooms where a bunch of people will sit around a table or on couches or whatever, and you'll hash out ideas. Wasn't there anyone who was like, guys, you know what this sounds like? I mean, it's just awful.
Yeah, you know, I will say this, in my opinion, at this juncture in time, the only redeeming feature in the MCU is Randall Park's FBI character. Randall Park is a comedic genius. I will not hear otherwise. And if Marvel really wanted to give me a show I could sink my teeth into, it would be his FBI agent in a sitcom. An actual sitcom, not an ironic thing where, no, but actually terrible things are happening in the background. Just Randall Park's kind of goofy FBI agent just sort of stumbling through the MCU in the background, dealing with these situations, but also managing a real suburban life where he's a youth pastor. He coaches his kids' softball team. That would be good. Marvel, if you're listening, I give you permission to take my idea.
I want to see a team up with him and Kat Dennings because I thought they were great together.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
And I want it to be like sort of like a spoof on the X-Files, but where we do get to see their normal life instead of like just hanging out in the basement. It's like both of them together being goofballs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know, so many possibilities would be, and it would be so less horrible than everything Marvel has done. Although I will say, and this is a no spoilers quick review, and I do, do we have time to talk some Lord of the Rings after?
Sure, I got
okay. I do. I do think as far as movies go, I like Doctor Strange more than. Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate that. That was tongue-in-cheek comment about demonetizing and super chatting, and I do appreciate that, Dan. We appreciate that. But I liked the new Doctor Strange movie because Sam Raimi got to let his hair down a little bit. I think it's the first Marvel horror movie. Yes. See it. Give it your time. And definitely check it out. My kids didn't like it because they thought Scarlet Witch was uncharacteristic in it. I liked it because Sam Raimi got to do some Sam Raimi shit. And I'm not going to spoil it. You've seen it, right, Yang?
Yeah, I saw it.
You know what I'm talking about, though, when I say Sam Raimi got to do some Sam Raimi shit.
Yeah. Some of the stuff was really, really good. But in some ways, it kind of reminded me of not Batman, Justice League. In that there seemed to be a lot of like studio interference. I think if they had just let Sam Raimi go, it would have been better. I can sort of understand from a studio's point of view, like you don't want to give him a full leash because a rated R Marvel movie would not be so great. But I think that it was pretty good. It was worth seeing. It was not as bad as Thor: Dark World. Let me put it to you that way. So yeah, if you like Doctor Strange, I'd recommend it. It's definitely one of the better movies in Phase 4. I'll say that. That's for sure.
Yeah. It really was. And I mean, I just Sam Raimi's just so damn good.
Yeah.
It gets 4 of its 7 stars out of 10, in my opinion, because it's Sam Raimi. If that had been any other director, if that had been Feige or anyone else, I think it would have fallen flat. But there's no spoilers here, guys. You should know this from the trailers. There is a scene when just by facial expression, and it's extremely close, like her face fills the entire screen, Scarlet Witch breaks the fourth wall, that will make your fucking skin crawl. You know, when she turns, when she's dream walking and she turns around and just stops and looks straight out at the audience, like that made my 19-year-old daughter who was at the theater with us, she was like, ah.
Now, question though, has your 19-year-old daughter seen the classic Raimis, the Evil Deads?
No, but so Army of Darkness, she could probably watch. She is legitimately like scares so easily, like anxiety attack level of scares. So Evil Dead 2, probably not. Army of Darkness, now that she's seen Multiverse, she could probably do Army of Darkness, because there's more than a couple of nods to Army of Darkness in Multiverse of Madness. But you know what I won't let her watch, just because I won't have it on my TV, is this Lord of the Rings thing, Rings of Power. Oh man. If you have anything to say about it, Yang, say it now, because I'm about to get on a horse, if you know what I'm saying.
It is befuddling. So for anyone who doesn't know, Amazon Prime bought the rights to Lord of the Rings. Now, we all know Peter Jackson made a trilogy. I'm like 50-50 on the trilogy. I'm one of the few people. It's very much a love it or hate it, but most people absolutely love it. And as far as adaptations go, it's pretty good. I mean, Lord of the Rings is not an easy series to adapt. They got great actors for the most part. The writing, you know, when they used the Tolkien stuff, was really good. But there was one thing that was sort of missing, and it's that you have to cut the books down to fit into these 3-movie series. And each movie is like 2.5 hours, something like that. So there's a lot of stuff you're cutting out. And Lord of the Rings is something that really could benefit from a longer form of entertainment, like a TV show. So Amazon Prime bought this, and instead of making, you know, the Lord of the Rings, they said, okay, well, no one's seen the Second Age, so let's do the Second Age. To which I say, all right, you know, the Second Age doesn't get as much love as it could. But then they decided, well, we're going to throw out what Tolkien wrote, and we're going to write our own stuff in there. And like Galadriel, who the whole point of her was like a silent power. She's one of the most powerful beings in the world, but it's not by arms. It's not by the sword. It's by intelligence. It's by, you know, in Tolkien's universe, magic is often having the universe conform to your will, sort of. And that's how she is so powerful. And nope, that's not what they're doing. She's in armor. She's got a sword. They want to make things, you know, again, in the name of diversity, they want all sorts of new characters and stuff. And instead of making it within the world, like there were darker skinned people in Tolkien's world, you could have people from those places, but no, they're going to be elves and things that just don't make sense by Tolkien's writing. And it's much worse in the sense that if you consider this is kind of like a prequel to the Lord of the Rings movies, What happened to all the black people between the end of this show and the beginning of the Jackson movies? Doesn't say very good things for this universe, does it?
Well, I think that may be part of their attempt to poison the works of Professor Tolkien. First of all, let me start this out by saying, when the latest round of assaults from the usual corners have come, Hail, Lobster, Unbreaded, Michael Connor, I was in the middle of the chapter of the Two Towers where Sam and Frodo and Gollum are, how should we say, guests of Faramir in Ithilien. Mm-hmm. And I was reading the description of Ithilien, and I was reading the dialogue that they wrote for Faramir, and that's when I suffered this sort of beautiful separation. I don't care if we're talking about Ralph Bakshi, Peter Jackson, Rankin Bass, or Amazon. Nobody can affect the books because nobody can touch what Tolkien did. Nobody can bring anything to the table that is comparable. They can't. It's an impossibility. So what they do and what they say in laying siege to Tolkien's work is so pathetic. It's like building a siege tower that is 2 feet tall out of twigs and matchsticks and saying that you're going to lay siege to Minas Tirith with it. And one person bringing it up and setting it forward and throwing pebbles at the wall. And so they can't really hurt it. But as someone who's like, there are people who are upset about the Rings of Power who will tell you unabashedly, I don't want the original trilogy sullied by this. And when this thing comes out, I'm just going to watch the DVDs the way Peter Jackson made them. And I'm like, have you ever read the books? Well, I started to, but I can't. And that just kind of blows my mind. And it's those people whose sole introduction to Lord of the Rings was watching those, quite frankly, bloated and overproduced, and at the same time underappreciative of Tolkien's works, films, that makes me upset at the Rings of Power. Because as you say, if they're saying, hey, all of this happened before the Lord of the Rings that you see in the movies, then where are these dwarves of color and elves of color? Are you going to, since they have the latitude to make shit up, which is part of their license to make shit up between their own universe and anything that starts to creep into the Hobbit, are they going to try and suggest that there has been some kind of pogrom, some kind of ethnic cleansing has gone on? Because if all you know is the movies and all you're going to know is this TV show, how are you going to reconcile that there aren't any dwarves or elves or hobbits or Easterlings or Rohanians or Gondorians or folk of the wilder country between the Shire and Mirkwood of color? How are you going to reconcile that? What are they going to do to bridge that gap? That kind of worries me, because I don't put it beyond Jeff Bezos and company to engineer something pretty awful. Maybe I should just get a foil hat, but that's just how I feel. That's just how I feel about it.
It's a shame too, because there are parts of his world that you really could. There's a lot of freedom to color within the lines. The Haradrim, down to the south with the giant war Oliphants, and in the Second Age. Oh well, how after the fall of Morgoth, how did Sauron talk these people into following him? That would be pretty darn interesting. You could still have the Númenóreans in their city of Umber. It would be great. But nope, that's not what we're getting.
Why could we not get, if you were going to just start making shit up, why could we not get a story about a brave band of Haradrim who would not follow Sauron's siren call and resisted all through the War of the Ring and fought for the kingdoms of men instead of falling under Sauron's evil spell? I would watch that. I would absolutely watch that.
And what were the Blue Wizards doing in the East with the Easterlings? How did that whole thing work out? Don't know. That would be a great that would be a great subject to follow. But no. And to your question about pogroms, that always made me wonder, are they going to start saying that Sauron was racist instead of just evil? He's not just plain evil. He's racist evil.
Right. I mean, aside from the fact that apparently orcs are supposed to be black, and therefore we have to, stop and consider that this evil racist in the Dark Tower also employs an army of people of color, except all the orcs we ever see in the Lord of the Rings are like pale and pasty skinned, or so dark that they're green. Hang on a second. I'm sure that I can engage in the same degree of cognitive dissonance that these people do. I
mean, Sauron, he basically hired Gollum, so that's a hobbit, and he had many men under his control. He seemed like a pretty equal opportunity hirer.
Yeah, absolutely. Equal opportunity corrupter. He was absolutely willing to use whatever was at hand. And here's the thing, the discussion we're having about this and the comments that people are leaving. And thank you all for your comments. I was like, it's the middle of a Saturday evening. We're going to get like 5 people watching, but we've had a good audience, and you guys have been engaging, and thank you so much. But no, the fact of the matter is that we're having this conversation. We're just haters. We can't adjust to the fact that Tolkien's work have to now reflect the reality in which we live. I do not fucking read The Lord of the Rings to engage with the reality of how we live. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons to do that. I don't read The Lord of the Rings. I don't watch Blade Runner. I don't read Conan the Barbarian comics. I don't read Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories to engage with the reality we live in. All I have to do is open the door and see how bad things are getting to engage with the reality we live in. I half expect every time I turn on a news report nowadays to see somebody going full on Peter Finch from Network. And if you haven't seen it and you don't know what I'm talking about, check it out. Howard Beale, you know what I'm talking about, right? And maybe that's me. Maybe I'm edging towards that right now. But the line, I don't have to tell you things are bad. Things are worse than bad applies to everything today. Everything. And I'm not going to sully that great performance by quoting any more of it. When I read The Lord of the Rings, I am performing the highest duty of the prisoner, and we're all prisoners. An act of escape, an act of rebellion.
Yep.
I don't want to turn on something that is supposed to entertain me after I have been told for 11 hours during the course of a day that I am racist, that I am sexist, that I am a bigot, that I am the reason the planet is dying, that I need to be bred out of existence, and then get it from something that is supposed to be entertaining too. Now, fortunately, I have books that are, 80 years old that I can read, and that's not the case. But apparently, I can't be left alone to enjoy things. That's all I wanted. That's all any of us wanted, was to be left alone. Left alone with our entertainment. Sure, on the news report, you want to tell me that the world is falling apart? Fine. You want to protest downtown, so I got to drive 48 minutes out of my way to get to the market? Great. Knock yourself out. Just let me alone with the works of a man who saw that the world could be a beautiful place after strife was dealt with. Fucking telling me that his works have to now be changed to reflect modern sensibilities makes me pray that there is a fire in the data center that stores all of these movies, and that the truck carrying the backups careens off the roads, off a cliff, into the sea, and it ceases to exist.
And
sorry, I kind of left you hanging there.
No. One of the interesting things I just thought about too is, you're mentioning books from 80 years ago. And I think that there was a real golden age, especially in the early to mid 20th century, with people's abilities for mass communications in terms of literature. You had radio shows, movies, and the coming of television. And we were living through a golden age. And I wonder if, we're sort of headed through a dark age. Because if you look through history, there are periods of like ancient Egypt where there were tons of stories being written, tons of new plays and festivals and everything. And then they would hit dark times and people would just read the old stuff again. For some reason, there was something that wasn't conducive with their current standard of life, that they weren't making new stuff. But eventually you did have people who slowly they would either start a new golden age themselves or, lay the groundwork so a successive generation would make a new golden age. And I kind of wonder if that's where we are. If everybody who's home brewing their own content, or everybody who's making their own indie comic or radio show or YouTube channel, even if we are not going to see, I'm getting a little older. So if I'm not going to see a new golden age in my lifetime, is the work that people are doing now, are we laying those foundations for a new golden age? I don't know.
I don't know. There's the clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good men create easy times. Easy times create weak men. Weak men create strifeful times. Strifeful times create good men. And I don't know where we're at on that clock. I have a feeling that we're over here in many ways. In the hard times, in the strifeful times.
But that just means those of us who are there, we just got to dust off our pants and, pick ourselves up and start working on our own stuff. Don't worry about all the weak men around us, we'll build ourselves up, and we will start those good times again.
I legitimately hope you're right, but I despair for it. I mean, I really, really do. I don't want anyone to watch Rings of Power. If you're fans of Jackson's movies, but you found the books turgid and boring, I pity you, but I understand at least, that point of view.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get a little conspiracy minded on you here, Yang, and anybody in the audience that wants to chime in on this. Look, you and I probably would disagree on a lot of stuff. I think I'm happy enough to say that you and I are simpatico and we're compadres and everything. But I mean, if we just sat down and said, look, we're just going to set the nerd stuff that we agree on aside, and all nerd stuff aside, we're going to talk about real, honest, hard facts. You and I would probably come to disagreement on a great many of those things. And that's true of everybody we know, not just you and me, but you and your neighbor across the street, dungeon minister, and somebody he knows. That's just how it is. That's the way the world works. Gears aren't smooth, right? They're teeth. And when they mesh up, it's great. And sometimes they don't mesh up. But when you say, well, Bill, no, I don't agree. I don't think that. I don't feel that's the case. Here's my case. And I say, well, Yang, I'm sorry you think that, brother, but I'm just not going to agree with it. You and I agree to disagree, and we walk away. If you had Jeff Bezos' money, would you spend it trying to change my mind? Would you would you then throw in $475 million to make me think the way that you think, or feel bad enough about the way I think that I just wouldn't express myself anymore?
That's an interesting question. Would Bezos's money be like the One Ring, something that would corrupt you no matter who you were?
I think I wasn't thinking with that analogy, but I think it is. But here is a company that put this trailer out there. It immediately got ratioed on YouTube. And by the way, at Amazon's behest, first of all, if you don't see downvotes on YouTube, get a plugin for your browser that will allow you to see downvotes. There's lots of them out there. Install it. Go look at the One Ring or the Rings of Power trailer, and you will see that there are like 26,000 upvotes and 1.5 million downvotes on the thing. Well, there are now 1.1 million downvotes because 450,000 of them disappeared like that, because somebody at Amazon called somebody at YouTube and said, I need you to start shaving these off. Despite the fact that by default, YouTube does not show downvotes. But when this started rolling in, we started seeing a lot of astroturfing. I'm looking at an article linked from Bounding Into Comics, which is a great website. You should definitely check it out, boundingintocomics.com. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will give you the headline and some salient bits. The Lord of the Rings fan site describes fans critical of the Rings of Power as toxic and questions their fandom. Now, I remember when the movies were under production, and I was still hopeful that Jackson would hold a lot truer to the vision of J.R.R. Tolkien than he eventually did. I would check the onering.net like 2-3 times a week, just to see production notes, updates, because New Line engaged with them and they gave them some authority. So this is not just some random schmo on the internet. And we come down here because somebody tweeted that a lot of YouTubers have pivoted to Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial coverage. This person, Cat Tenbarge, says, content creators of all genres are pivoting to cover the Depp versus Heard trial, writing the algorithm to millions of views. I spoke to one 15-year-old boy who went from Elden Ring streams to trial coverage. He's now at 22 million channel views and counting. Maybe I should switch the Delver's Dungeon to Heard versus Depp trial. I don't know. And then the One Ring comes back and says, sharing this for all of our fellow Latro enthusiasts and media outlets who might get discouraged by toxic Tolkien takes on YouTube. It's the algorithm's fault and does not represent an honest view of our fandom. Fuck you. Seriously, dude, tell me that's not astroturfed. Tell me someone at Amazon wasn't leaning over, grabbing the OneRing.net by the wrists and facilitating them typing that on the keyboard.
Sure. Well, I've long had suspicions of the OneRing.net. So I actually used to use that site before the Peter Jackson movies were announced.
Really?
It was a very good site, and they had all sorts of like theoretical discussions about, what happened to Sam and Frodo when they went to Valinor, and all sorts of these things that are in the weed. And it was really interesting. And of course they started posting stuff about the movies, which got them quite famous back in the day, long before there was a YouTube and social media. But when you're used to a certain amount of money rolling in from ads, and you're used to a certain amount of traffic of people talking about your work, what do you do after that? Then what has there been? I mean, there were the Hobbit movies, but those were pretty terrible as well. What's the OneRing.net have to do since then? Nothing. So they're going to jump at any chance to make some money. And I'm sure if Amazon said, hey, look, we're going to give you this money for advertising, and even if it's not explicitly stated, you better like the stuff that we're putting out, it's going to be pretty obvious that Amazon expects a certain amount of glowing praise to come from that site. So yeah, it's is there a coordinated campaign from Amazon? I don't know about that, but there are certain groups of people who want to hear the same things. They know what the party line is, and they're going to keep on it. And so, yeah, it's like we were talking about before, watching video game playthroughs versus trusting video game journalism. All journalism is in the same state, where except for very independent journalists, they're pretty much cowed in by these large companies. There's only a few large companies that are under the same umbrella anyway. So, you better say Disney stuff is good. You better say Warner Brothers stuff is good. You can crap on foreign media a little bit if you want. But is the Lord of the Rings stuff AstroTurf? Totally. And the other thing is, are there people who are doing the same thing on the other side too? Sure. How much clickbait is there in saying everything is awful? And even if it's right, are they doing it because they really don't like it, or are they doing it because it's a Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation where they're just going to make money off of it?
Now, I am going to agree with you. I actually went through my YouTube subs a while ago, and there's a couple of channels that I started looking at, and I've left comments like I mentioned these guys before. I think Clownfish is a very nice channel, and I've made some comments on Clownfish. But even they acknowledge, they're like, yeah, we're kind of just turning into the everything is awful about this. And they're both like, yeah, we're kind of doing that, but we feel like we got to talk about this stuff. And I mean, I get it. It's a gig, right? We're not sitting here talking about sunshine and lollipops. We're talking about things that are being awful too. But There are a lot of channels that I had never heard of, but because I started watching Clownfish, I'm like, oh, hey, do you like this? And I'm not going to engage in IBS and talk about who these people are. Okay. You guys who follow nerd media on YouTube probably know who I'm talking about. Yang, you almost certainly will know who I'm talking about.
Sure.
But people that post 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 updates a day of pre-recorded and edited videos with intro and outro stings and graphics on the screen and stuff. I have to appreciate that hustle. I really do. But all they do is talk about how awful everything is. So there's definitely some money to be made by outrage clicks and outrage views. I mean, I talk about how great I think AD&D is.
Yeah,
I could probably do 5 videos a day, or at least 3 videos a day, just talking about how awful Wizards of the Coast and 5e is. And I might actually drive up my viewership. But that's not my jam.
Possible. Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right about there being gold in them there doom and gloom. But with that said, to go back to what I was saying, man, when you look at the budget, when you look at the money sink, and personally, I don't think this show makes it past 2 seasons because streaming is starting to slump and people are looking at places to cut, to pinch pennies and cut things out of their budget. So I don't think this show makes it past 2 seasons, but you got to admit, $2 billion is a pretty nice little tax dodge, isn't it? If you can turn around and tell the tax collectors, not just in the U.S. but in New Zealand and the U.K. and Spain, we didn't make any money on this thing. But when you're talking about $2 billion, I mean, imagine, Yang, imagine if tomorrow somebody knocked on your door and said, hey, you got this little YouTube channel. It's actually, we're kind of starting to see some traffic on it. What if we just dropped $500K on you and you just kind of went away from indie comics and just talked about Marvel comics and how good they are? 500 large. Would you do it?
Me personally,
could you look your wife in the eye and say, honey, I'm just going to support independent comics. Somebody offered me $500,000 to just be a Marvel guy, but I'm going to support independent comics. Why are you crying?
I would say that I wouldn't, because I am the kind of guy who would cut off his own nose to spite his face. So, and I have done similar things. I used to live in China, and I have had lucrative offers to appear on TV for them. For what was then
Did you have like some weird Rochambeau game that you played over there? They like had you like hop on one foot and wrap your arm around you and try and punch a guy.
Oh, did I tell you about that?
You did mention it.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So there's, at the time it was CCTV 5. I think they rebranded it. And that was like the ESPN of China. And there's a game where you stand on one leg. And let's say I'm standing on my left leg. With my left hand, I would grab my right ankle, so that it's kind of like, you're hopping around like that, and you have to knock other people over. I unwittingly was on the championship on ESPN China for there was like 3 of us foreigners against the Chinese champ, and
you were like, this is a game they played since they were 3. I've never done this before just now.
Yeah, I never heard of it. And yeah, the funniest thing was my good friend who got me hooked up into that. When we got there, and I'm like, hey, wait, why are there all these cameras? because it wasn't just like the ESPN. There was all sorts of local for Beijing, and there were for other city, like the news crews. And I'm like, why are they all here? And he's like, hey, don't worry about it. China has 1.2 billion people, but only 800 million have TVs, so it's fine. I was actually on TV over there a number of times in small things. I was offered, for some reason, people think my English sounds good. So I was offered a radio job. They have like an English language channel, which is aimed at Chinese people, which was really weird. And they wanted me on that, but part of that would be broadcasting communist propaganda news. And I was like, no. And they offered me, a lady I worked with, she was a producer on one of the national TV channels. And so I was offered like, oh, do you want to make like a travel show? I was doing Kung Fu, like, oh, do you want to travel around China doing Kung Fu for the TV show? And I said, no, I don't mind appearing like in a man on the street news interview or something, but I'm not going to work on these propaganda things because I know it would come back to bite me in the ass later in life. Communism was never, I'm kind of a simple guy. I don't really need money. I just need a place to live and just want to do what I want to do and generally be left alone.
Right.
So no, $500,000 from Amazon would not tempt me.
So you wouldn't go on to you wouldn't go on to Amazon and sing the praise, or on your YouTube channel and sing the praises of mainstream comics?
If they were doing something right, I would. If I could find, I have had some. I reviewed some Conan the Barbarian comics a couple of years ago. So before the pandemic, I actually used to review mainstream comics. It got depressing, and during the pandemic, I was kind of glad all the comic book stores were closed because I was really tired of spending good money on that. And that's when I went totally to indies, because part of it was just because that's all I could get. And now I'm pretty happy. No, you know what? I did review one, New Mutants War Child, which had Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz come back. That was 2020, I think.
Wow, that is a powerhouse, man. Bill Sienkiewicz's artwork is fantastic, and Chris Claremont is a golden god of X-Men writing. Man.
Yeah, so I don't have anything innately against large media companies. I just think that there's a problem with groupthink within them. Well, first of all, there's a malevolent force that wants to ruin everything that you love and use it as a skin suit for their ideological views of the world, which is bad. But even if it wasn't that, you would see some of the most bland content you've ever seen, and it's always at the margins where things are a lot more interesting. So, the Marvel movies, they are kind of formulaic because it works. Some of the in the first generation that came out were more interesting because they were trying a lot of new things. But I would expect them as time to get more boring, and we kind of expected like the Netflix with their Daredevil series and those. We expected those to be the edgier, more interesting things, but sadly, it has not worked out that way. So, mainstream media, if they're not, using things for ideological purpose, I'm just fine. But if they actually do sponsor good products, occasionally they'll say, we don't know what's good. We'll just throw money at these guys or those guys. And if some of those people do good work, I'm happy to say I like that too. But, I wouldn't take money from them. I wouldn't take money from indie creators. And there are very few books that I actually promote. I have people on the channel and I let them promote themselves, but I don't necessarily promote the work, especially if I haven't seen the work. I leave it up to them to make their own case.
And that's fair enough. I mean, it's more tongue in cheek, like what would you sell out for? But honestly, I mean, when I look at Torn and I look at, other outlets going on, I just feel like there's, I don't know. There's pressure coming from above to make people like this. I mean, it's almost like they're trying to be Galadriel and have the ring at the same time. All will love me and despair. You're skipping over the love part and just giving us the despair part, Amazon.
Yeah, and I think it's a larger sickness. So I used to work in marketing. I did that for like 15 or so years. And I left at around 2010, 2012. So when I was getting out of it, I noticed that a lot of the people who were coming up, they just had different worldviews, and a lot of what they thought didn't mesh with reality. And I kind of thought that like maybe I was just becoming an old man, and it's like because they were younger, they didn't have enough life experience or something. But no, these are just people who live very insular lives where, it didn't seem to matter what they did. They always kind of failed upwards. No one was really willing to, in education, no one was willing to tell them that their stuff sucked and that they needed to, shape up. There was no, there's this trend to like be friends with everyone, be friends with your children, instead of somebody at some point has to be the authoritative figure for your own benefit. Somebody has to tell you like, no, you're not doing a good job. And here, and here are where you're failing, so that you can improve yourself. So there seems to be a whole thing in the entertainment industry where there's a generation of people who were not told that their stuff is bad. We're not given any sort of constructive criticism, where they can improve. So somehow they got into these positions of authority, and the heads of these companies, maybe some of them are ideologically driven, but there's still a profit motive. And all of these younger people told them like, hey, this is going to make us some money, and then when it doesn't appear, now they're grasping at straws. Like, oh, well, why isn't the money here? Well, it's the racists. It's these evil fans. And, it can't be their own mistakes, because like we talked about, they could easily achieve a lot of their goals if they did the projects in a certain way that was more palatable to us. Like better version of Ironheart, better version of Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel. I would totally be down to watch a lot of this stuff if it were done better. So I think that we're in a very weird place where where there's like a whole generation of people who just were never held to task for poor work. And I think that in some places the facade is starting to crack. I don't know if you saw this week, I think it was Thursday or Friday, Netflix sent a memo out to their workers that said, hey, we are no longer going to censor people. And this was mostly related to Dave Chappelle's comedy. But they said, we're not going to censor people. And if you don't like it, maybe this isn't the place for you to work. That's a pretty powerful statement coming from Netflix.
I did see that. Good afternoon, Vincent. Good to see you. No, I saw that, and I think maybe the tide is turning. Maybe the tide is turning. A lot of people who are a little less black-pilled than I am on this subject are, saying, hey, this is, finally there's a break in the clouds. And I'm like, is it a break in the clouds, or is it just we're now in the eye of the hurricane? And I know hurricanes, and I know a lot about them living in Hurricane Central here in Florida. But, Are we in the eye of the hurricane and the south wall is about to slam into us? In another little bit, or is this the actual end of it? Is it finally starting to break up with things like Netflix saying, hey, we're not, again, if you're pro censorship, maybe this isn't the place to be. I'll believe it when I see YouTube taking that stance, when I see reports that Amazon has reversed its position on a great many aspects of Rings of Power. When I hear that, like, did you hear a few months ago about the Twitch source code leaks?
No, I didn't hear about that.
So somebody basically released like a multi-terabyte tarball, which is it's a computer file archive in Linux, but they released a tarball of internal files specific to Twitch TV and a lot of code specific to Twitch TV. And one thing that was found when they went through the website source code, literally hard coded into the website's HTML code. And HTML is a gross simplification. It's XML. It's a lot of MLs. It's not just that. Was if people report these, like if people are watching this person's stream and they click the report button, do not send the reports. Do not escalate these reports to our regular staff that would go look at these videos and say, that's not right. Send it instead to these individual people. And these individual people that were being referred to by username in the code are people who are known to be very friendly with the people in the exception buttons.
Yep.
When I hear that stuff like that is getting people terminated, when I see that like Jessica Price has been given her walking papers at Wizards of the Coast, and WotC is backing off of their "you're fired if you like old D&D" attitudes, then I'll say that the clouds are starting to break up. When I can pick up an issue of Iron Man and not be preached at, when I can enjoy any aspect of the things I like to enjoy and be left alone while I do it, then I'll think, okay, the clouds are starting to break up. So,
yeah, I kind of agree with you. So there's a comment by Luther Pendragon.
Mm-hmm.
It says it will all have to die first. It can never simply transition back. We will have to go through 5 years with nothing first. Time for people to realize who destroyed it all and why. And I think that's very true. We can't just set the clock back. But, in a lot of ways, this is why I'm hopeful. This is why I think it's a fantastic time for people such as you and me and small creators. We are soon going to see the whole thing crumble down, and we are going to be in that 5-year period. And that's an excellent time for us to just keep doing what we're doing. And we will have all sorts of products for people who, that mainstream stuff isn't there. And if it is there, it's so unpalatable. Nobody's going to want it. It's going to be like 1990s Domino's pizza. So they're going to come looking for, they're going to come back and they're going to say, hey, I like this AD&D 1E stuff. That sounds a lot more interesting to me. Let me try that game. Or even if they say, well, I've watched all these streams, I'm familiar with 5e, but I don't like this Wizards of the Coast stuff. I'm going to go for an indie creator and buy an indie campaign book. And I think that it's a chance for new people. It's almost like slash and burn tactics in agriculture. The forest is burned down, and all of a sudden the soil is very fertile for new things to grow.
Mm-hmm. I think Michael Connor hits the nail on the head. We have to stop giving money to people who hate you.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think a lot of people who are tacitly in agreement with what we're saying, and look, I'm just as guilty of this too. Okay, I'm just as guilty of this too. I want people to have first edition AD&D, short of paying $75 or $100 per book for books that are going to be in questionable condition. Do you really want a mold spore culture that smells like cat pee and cigarette smoke sitting on your bookshelf just because it says AD&D on the cover? And pay $125 for it. So I say, oh, go to Wizards of the Coast. Well, go to DM's Guild, go to Drive Through RPG, and buy the products and get them done print on demand. Queen of the Demon Web Pits here, PDF's only like $9. Well, guess what? That's $9 of pure profit, 100% net profit to Wizards of the Coast. And I mean, I can't say that I have the intestinal fortitude to say, yeah, look, just play Osric and other indie stuff. Don't play AD&D, because to me, that's kind of like ignoring Gary's legacy. There's so much neat stuff written in the Dungeon Master's Guide that I want people to read the way Gary wrote those things. And I just feel like there's, I've dropped so many streaming subscriptions, Yang, just because I see stuff like Cuties.
Yep.
I see, dude, I just want, I love Magnum PI for its 6 glorious seasons of the best TV detective television ever made. Ever.
We all want that mustache.
We all love that mustache. We all love that car. We all love Higgins. We all love Magnum PI. And it's on Amazon. Well, guess what? Amazon goes up. Hey, seasons 2 and 3, they're not free. You want to watch seasons 1, 4, 5, and 6? That's fine. But 2 and 3, you got to pay for them. All right. Well, you know what? I'll just wait you out. Because you bring stuff back around for free. And then, hey, seasons 1, 2, 3, 4 are free. 5 and 6, you got to pay for. Don't you wish you'd watched them all for free now? I'm like, God damn, come on. But I won't, I've been sitting here bitching about Rings of Power. And what did I just say that I have? An Amazon subscription. And it's just, it's hard to do. It is hard to do. I mean, the people that provide you with broadband, if you drill down enough, whether you're on the left-hand side of the equation or the right-hand side of the equation, might do something you absolutely despise. And if you take that moral stance of, I'm going to walk away from this, what are you going to do for broadband?
Yep. And that's one thing that we haven't touched on in this whole discussion is piracy. Throughout human history, people have always wanted things that they couldn't get. Now, if it was legal to get, it just wasn't in your area, you just go to a merchant. But there was always smuggling, right? And why do you need to smuggle? Because of laws, because of taxes, because of prohibitions on things. And we saw what happened with Sean Fenning in the music industry. They used to make you buy a whole album of crap for one song that you liked, and the whole album just imploded within like 5 years. So, what's to stop people from sailing the seas to get a lot of these products? If I can't get AD&D 1E legally, am I going to feel so bad about downloading it? Not that I'm promoting it. But I will tell a quick story back when I was in college in the 90s. So I lived in a dorm. At the end of the hallway was a broom closet. Turns out all the cable boxes were in that broom closet, which we found out. So
I like where the story's going. Go on.
At the time, it was like $50 a month for cable, which was outrageous for college students back then. So only like one guy in the dorm had it. But once we discovered that was there, somebody would distract the cleaning lady, and somebody else would go in and just literally plug every single coaxial cable into these jacks, and we would all have free basic cable. Now, if they had charged like $10 a month, that's something we could afford. But no, they didn't want to do that. They wanted 50, so they got nothing. And that's kind of the position that I see for a lot of these companies. Like, Cuties was bad. I'm not as down on Netflix in general as a lot of people. I think the Cuties guy got fired though. But if they are starting to make a turnaround, great. You only got like 3 movies I want to watch a month. There aren't many series I want to see. So why am I going to pay more and more money for your content?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, after Stranger Things is done, which I think they're doing one more season after this one.
I think 5 said. Yeah.
I won't even bother pirating Netflix, but no, you're making a perfect point. And let me tell the younger crowd, I don't think there's a younger crowd in our audience. I think they're all old men like we are, but back in the 90s, I saw a fairly seminal horror movie called Man Tetsuo. Look, don't Google it. If you haven't seen it, you're better for it. Your life is better for having not seen Man Tetsuo. It's not a Serbian film level of bad, but it's getting there. But the soundtrack, which was done by the film's producer, was amazing industrial music. I don't mean industrial music like Ministry, like Front 2-4. I mean, it was industrial music, and it was really, really good. Good luck getting it ever anywhere. It was released on vinyl and cassette in Japan, which is where the movie came out, on a small label. Now watch, somebody's going to pop up in the chat and say, I can get that on CD from Amazon now. But at the time in the 90s, I had no access to it. I had Usenet and email. Gopher search would take days. Gopher or Veronica search would take days to return. And I worked in a record store. We had contacts with indie music outlets, even though it was a corporate record store, and I couldn't get my hands on it. Well, I just a number of years ago, but recent enough that we had broadband, I said, yo ho ho, and I raised the black flag. And guess what I found out there on the sharing networks? Man Tetsuo full soundtrack. And I had it.
And this brings up an interesting question too, because anyone who's actually familiar with the history of at least recent piracy, anyone would know Metallica was one of the bands that brought the lawsuits against Napster to stop people from sharing files. But people forget, when Metallica started, they encouraged fans to record their concerts, and then they also encouraged fans to make cassette copies of this and give it to other friends. And they used this as a way to build their audience, and they were perfectly happy with it. A lot of musical artists who are smaller, they were they were actually making out during the Napster days because people were like, I'm not going to pay $25 for a whole CD, but I'll download it for free. And then they did. And then they're like, oh, I do like this. Okay, maybe I will support this artist somehow. So I think that, not that I'm supporting piracy, but what I am saying is getting your product out to people at a cost that not only they want, because like nobody wants to pay anything for a product, right? 1 cent, that's the best price. But getting a good product out at a reasonable price is that happy medium. And if that's imbalance in any way, either you can't provide your product at that cost, or if you're just way too much for what the market can afford, that's not going to be good for business. And if you're trying to push an ideology, well, you're still trying to make some money while you're pushing that ideology. So all in all, I think a return to cheaper items, like you were mentioning, Temple of the Frog God was $9.99. Did you say?
Temple of
Early?
the Frog.
Temple of the Frog God?
Just talking about D&D modules on yeah.
So, $9.99 is not such a bad price. And you could play that for quite a while. That's, certainly worth $10 of entertainment for you and your friends for several weeks. So I see, again, smaller creators are going to be able to dominate that space because they don't need as much cost. And I will point out to anyone who's thinking of making your own music, making your own role-playing games, comic books, whatever, remember, once you make it and once you pay whatever costs you need to pay up front, if you need an artist, if you need someone to do typesetting, editing, whatever, for the rest of your life, you will be able to make money on that product and keep reselling it.
Yes.
So it's not an issue of, I need to, get a Kickstarter, Indiegogo and make that money now. No, if you're in your 30s, well, guess what? You got like 50 more years of income off that thing, and you could resell it in different ways, package it with something else, co-package it with some other people's stuff for an anthology. It's just, once you put the money in, it's just free money after it. So don't be discouraged if there's an upfront price on something.
Yeah. And I mean, you're absolutely right. It's funny that you bring up Metallica and Lars and whatnot. If you're from the Southeast, and you lived here in Florida for a while, we had there was a record store that almost exclusively sold imports and bootlegs, and it was called Armadillo Records. And I bought one of their cassettes, a Pink Floyd tape that I still have somewhere probably. And it was the cinematic version of The Wall. So like that, basically they sat and concatenated all of the music from The Wall into a listenable album form. It was the first place where I heard When the Tigers Broke Free without it being in the film. But I was talking to a store clerk at Armadillo Records. I was in my teens and I went there. It was actually the day I bought this, and she was talking to me about this heavy metal band called Metallica. And Metallica, when they would play gigs in the Central Florida area, which they were starting to ramp up to do tours with other bands, including Ozzy. They played Monsters of Rock, which passed through Orlando. Metallica would stop by Armadillo Records and buy good boots of their music to hear what they sounded like. And it seems to me that Lars and James and Kirk, who's always been kind of silent on the rampant assholery that runs through at least half of that band, were kind of okay with it once upon a time.
Yep.
So it's you commenting about streaming services or about sharing services, I should say, yo ho ho and all, I think is fairly salient. I think it's absolutely relevant. Greetings, Mobius. Greetings, Eloise. Good to see you. Did I miss anyone else? Nope. Gang's all here. We have 20 viewers on right now. I was messaging.
Wow, that's pretty good.
I like, do you need to go, dude? And he's like, I can go on for whenever. And then I'm like, there's 20 people. We can't just walk out now. So yeah, I definitely think we might be entering a phase if media first of all, if media collapses, streaming media collapses, I just see like the three major networks just kind of standing there as people go schlepping back to them for, fixed time slot, 30-minute shitcoms and nightly news and rom-coms, and then the late night talking heads going, well, look who comes crawling back. If it isn't we want everything on demand viewers and the consequences of their actions.
See, I don't know. I don't think that's a lesson they're going to take out of it, because I would say great. I mean, who wouldn't like another Golden Girls? There's a lot of fantastic stuff that we could have, another WKRP in Cincinnati. But I think what we're going to get is like more Survivor, but worse. It'll be like Urban Survivor. Like my wife likes to watch a lot of this stuff. Like she's watching like Ink Master, it's like a competitive tattooing show. And then there's like, I want to say it's called like Blowmaster or something. It's like a competitive glass blowing show. And it's like, whew, how many of these same things can we have? And, they're going to be like, well, this is cheaper than making Alf. So
yeah.
And where's Married with Children? What TV network is going to be brave enough to make a new, not a remake, a sort of a new Married with Children? That's what I want to know. I don't think it's going to come from network TV, but I do think you would probably see some on some streaming service. Would it be YouTube? I don't know. Would it be Rumble or Odyssey? Hard to say. Maybe we'll even go backwards a little bit, and we'll have the iTunes. They had podcasts. So you had fantastic show like Tiki Bar TV and Ask a Ninja that were out and popular before YouTube came around and made sort of a central place to view it. Maybe we'll head backwards like that, where everybody's going to host things on their own website, and then there'll just be some aggregator that we use to find content that we like.
I gotta be honest, I don't want to go back to broadcast TV, but
no,
I mean,
it's good for sports.
Yeah, it's good for, exactly. It's good for sports. Like I've never made any bones about, I love college football, and I can watch it right over. Like, why Roger Goodell doesn't realize that charging me a flat fee and giving me the option to watch any football game. Look, I don't care if Tampa, Miami didn't sell out.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Florida. Showing me Denver, Seattle, when there's a team 75 miles in that direction, playing a team that's 300 miles in that direction, that makes zero sense, but college football is the other way around. I can pull up as many college football games as I can stomach on a Saturday, which is a lot, by the way. I love college football. And just put them up on my PC while I, if I'm doing laundry or coming over here to do show related stuff, like I do pre-show stuff. I can do whatever. And I want that degree of, that sort of hedonistic, I'm just going to lay back on the divan and reach out and pluck off a grape to snack on kind of attitude. I never want to go back to, you know, oh shit, tonight's the season finale of whatever show, so I got to be home. I got to DVR it. I got to futz around with the computer just so I don't miss it. You know.
Yep.
I don't want to go back to that.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to. I don't think it's possible. Plus, I don't think the networks, the programmers who are there, I don't think they have the chops to do the kinds of things that the good things that they were doing back in the 70s and the 80s and even 90s. I just think that it's all going to be indie. Why can't you and your 4 friends hang out at a coffee shop and make a sitcom there and in your house? You know, there's no reason you can't make friends at home. There was nothing special about that facility wise. There's actually I did a review of oh my gosh, I think it was Heisenberg Comics. Wait, sorry, let me just scroll through my videos. It was dang, I can't find it. Oh, I know I did it. Oh, here we go. Heroinberg. It's 2 guys from Pittsburgh, and they're like, we want to make feminist comics, which, all right, you think about that for a second. But all it is it's just all women superhero. They don't crap on men. It's just women doing awesome things, and it's very cool. And the weird thing is, they started making videos. Now, I really got to have those guys on my channel one time to figure out, did the comics come about to support the videos, or did the videos come about to support the comics? But they're fascinating. They have local actresses and some men in there as well in Pittsburgh. But it's like, you know, they're supposedly in a police station, and it's like, you know, a card table on a shag carpet that's clearly in somebody's apartment. But it's, you know, like the police captain's desk and stuff. And they have a place where the preeminent geologist in the world is, and she just happens to work in a gem shop in her part-time. And it's awesome because they really enjoy what they're making. And I mean, it's not high quality, but it's, you know, when something's made with love, like I would watch that. Now they're charging like $2 an episode. I'm not going to watch it for that. But, you know, if they threw it up on YouTube or some other service where they could monetize it, like I would watch that. It reminds me of cable access TV back in the 90s, for anybody who remembers that. Yep. That was the government mandated. You know, cable could be a monopoly, but they had to have a cable access channel where anybody from the community could basically get on TV. And oh my God, anybody from the community did. And you saw some of the craziest stuff. It was very often Christian shows, but there would be other people, and it would be like, oh my God, who thought of that? You know, for anyone who remembers the movie or the Saturday Night Live skits of Wayne's World, that's what it was based on. But that was a pretty accurate depiction of things that were going on. And now you have YouTube. Everybody has cable access now. So I really see in this downturn, when the major platforms have screwed themselves and become unaffordable for most people, and network TV has dropped the ball yet again for more reality schlock, I think it's going to be these small channels that are really going to pick the ball up and run with it.
Well, I think you're right. I hope you're right, because we're going to get a much better variety. And I mean, who knows where the next Mystery Science Theater 3000 is going to come from? You know, that started as PBS, a show on PBS in Hopkins, Minnesota. And I sincerely hope it is. And we complain about Michael Connor brings this up because I love this guy's channel, by the way. This is good content. Call Me Chato. You guys subscribe to Yang and Dungeon Minister's channels, but also go check out Call Me Chato. His stuff is great. He covers a lot of subjects, but there's so much that I watch on YouTube. Like Saturday morning YouTube is like Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid, because there a lot of uploaders hit on Friday night and Saturday morning. And there's a couple of car resto guys, which has led to me watching other car resto guys. There's this guy out of Portland who actually does cable access TV like intro credits. It's Adrian Black's Digital Basement. And this guy does computer restos. I mean, like he has taken computers that have been buried in fields. I'm not kidding you. Like a Commodore 64, he got that had been buried in a field for 30 years and got it cleaned up and working again. I mean, that's amazing. And I sit down on a Saturday morning and I watch like 4 or 5 hours of quality TV. Let me get that URL for you, because we have a question Mank wants to know. I'm going to copy and paste that into the chat. And let me tell you guys, before I forget, before my voice gives out, it's pasted right there. But we're only going to do these once a month, which is good, because I think we're chewing through most of our good ideas right now. But the next time we do the stream, I'm still gonna link it up and everything, but we're gonna be over on Yang Yan Zhao's channel. We're gonna be at his place, and then if the Dungeon Minister wants to set up his channel, and we'll stream off that, and we'll just kind of hop around. But we'll still share the streams. I'll still tweet them out and everything like that. And Dungeon Minister, Mikey Mank, if you're not subbed to Dungeon Minister, sub to his channel also. And I'm sharing that link again here. But if I could go back, so I started this channel as kind of not this channel. I started live streaming just on Facebook to kind of help people not go crazy when we were all literally shut up in our houses. You know, it's not quite as bad as China, where they've welded people shut in their homes, but you know, no, I started this just to do that. But if I could go back and start it all over again, just push the time reset button and go back, I would, and only be able to change my YouTube channel. There's so much in the world I would change if I could do that. But I would probably steal a page from Adrian Black and do my show, like throw a retro video filter on it and do it like an old school cable access show. You know, maybe get some faux wood paneling for the walls behind me. I'm halfway there with this door, but because I think that's a really cool look.
You got to go full 1970s basement, man.
Absolutely. I go
way to do D&D.
Full 1970s. But that kind of thing just appeals to me. And we have so much good content out there. There's no reason to wonder about where the next big thing will come from. Look, let me tell you something. Other than when I was a little kid, and I say little kid, it's like 12, 13, 14 years old. I've never been a car guy. Okay, I drive them. When they make funny noises, I worry about them, which means I'm worrying about both of my cars constantly right now. Because I watched computer restoration videos and I was running out of fun vintage computer restoration videos to watch, YouTube said, restoration. You like cars? Look at this. And I started watching a guy's channel on YouTube, Junkyard Digs. Is this guy Kevin? He's this complete lunatic out of Iowa, and his friends take a truck that had been parked in a field for or rather, it had been parked in a forest. Excuse me, it had been parked in a forest for 28 years, 29 years. It had basically been parked since the beginning of the 1990s, and they got it drivable again. They literally spent 2 8-hour days and took a car that I would say the only thing that's going to move that is a tow truck or a forklift, and then to a car crusher. And because I started watching those guys and following those guys, YouTube was like, hey, check these car resto videos out. And so I started watching Vice Grip Garage. He's a dude that flew from where he lived at the time in southern Wisconsin to the far side of Kansas and got a Chevelle that had been parked for about the same amount of time, for like 31 years, got a Chevelle that was literally falling apart, got it working just enough to drive 1,000 miles home, and has turned it into one of the like biggest attractions on small racing circuits now. He calls it the Independence. Guys, the point that I'm saying is not that you should go watch car resto videos or any particular kind of videos. But Yang is absolutely right. There is so much good stuff out here. Toy Galaxy. I didn't know that about Toy Galaxy, but no, there's just monumentally good stuff out there. And if Luther Pendragon is right, and we do have to basically push pause for 5 years, there's plenty of content to fill it.
Yep.
Just on YouTube alone. Let's see what the audience has got to say. Let's see. 1 million excellent animated history channels on YouTube. Oversimplified. Yes, indeed. My daughter turned me on to a couple. My youngest nephew learned a lot about car repairs from YouTube and has helped rebuild a lot of old cars and get paid for it. He is paid as that is awesome. And that's something else too. Like, even on a cable access show, what could they do? Take a letter. You could send them a letter, and in a couple of weeks, they'd say, oh, we got a letter from Yang in California. He writes. And if you missed it, well, but here I can interact directly with you guys. If people have questions about things, even if it's just some spin-off, then, in the middle of our conversation, like you're like, I'm talking about car channels that I watch, and you want to know what they are. I can tell you immediately. Yang can answer your questions immediately. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Vincent. We love it too. We love it too. I'm just scrolling up here. Yang, do you see anything you wanna chat on?
No, although I did have maybe some ideas for the next show.
Go ahead. What are you going to talk about next time? Let's hear it.
Oh, I don't know. I just had a thought of GR was talking about his nephew learning about car repairs online and getting paid for it. And that just has me, I've been thinking a lot about the education industry in general. And do you really need to go to college? And how, it's a big question, but I'm kind of wondering nerd topics in the future. If you want to be a computer programmer, if you want to go into design, if you want to go into writing, any of these sorts of industries, you really need to spend $100,000 on college.
We're going to talk about it more when we get there, but no, trade school. If you have to do secondary, go trade school, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So next time, I don't know. I don't know what outrages we're going to face between now and next month that are going to drive me to be very drunk on the show. But no, I think that's a fine topic for next time. How about you folks out in the audience? Is there anything, because we're going to do these nerd roundtables, we're going to bring people in. I'm hoping next time Dungeon Minister will be under neither heat wave nor blizzard and be able to stick with us and talk for a while, although it was great seeing you in the audience. So if there's anything out there you guys would like us to talk, this is not me talking about D&D stuff. It may get mentioned in passing, but I'm not here to talk about how far an elf can throw a dwarf, okay? So if it's comics, movies, TV, I'd say probably, unless it's a real hot button thing, we'll probably avoid some politics. I mean, we might get a lot of people looking at us, but honestly, that's a degree of negativity that's just a little too dark. Just let us know in the comments. Hit us on the Discord, and we'll bring it. Comics, movies, music. I think we talked about comics, movies, and music today. Luther says, do the show drunk. What makes you think I do these shows sober, Luther? This just as easily could have been vodka or Bombay gin. I'm just saying. It wasn't. I will have a beer every once in a while during a show, but sometimes, like I've uncorked 2, and I can hear myself starting to trip when I'm talking, and I'm like, deep breath. So I don't, there's all those rumors about famous broadcasters and stuff. Like I was talking about college football. Brent Musburger, love Uncle Brent, loved listening to him talk college football. But yeah, you could hear him talking in cursive, as they say. So yeah, just whatever you guys want to hear, just throw us ideas. And next time, Yang, you're going to host, right?
That's right.
So we're going to be on Yang's. I will still tweet about it. I will still talk about it on the stream and promote the heck out of it. But part of this, folks, is to promote. We've been talking about small creators. Yang's a small creator. I'm a small creator. I only just crested 1,000 subs. I want to get Yang there. Okay, I want to get the Dungeon Minister there. A rising tide lifts all boats, brother. It'll be sooner than you think. But we'll work it out. Mikey Mang says every week there's tons of fodder for the topics you discussed today. We're only doing this every month unless it just gets super popular and people are beating down our door. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah,
and that's about all I got. Yang, any closing thoughts?
For any of you who are on the fence about creating your own content, whether it be tabletop role-playing games, writing for novels, for comics, getting your art out there, it's never been a better time. Don't let all these naysayers and people discourage you. Go for it. You'll be happy about it in the end.
Darn right. And we'll see you guys in June. We'll do this, and we'll see if we can't get more people here on the council, so you don't just have to listen to Yang and I talk. Y'all have an absolutely wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you then. Peace.